know, we literally were. There we go. It's fixed and everything's fine. Hello, friends. Anyone joining us today? Welcome. It's been a little while since the Twitch Book Club streams have happened. We did 3 months in a row of doing our once a month. We were consistent. It was great. And then real life happened, as it does to many of us. And we've still been reading our books. We've still been picking books and reading them a month, but the actual scheduling of finding guests to join me and discussing the book has been a hard time. But I was very excited for today because obviously a lot of the books we've read so far, if you've looked at the previous streams or like the VODs on YouTube, have skewed heavily into fantasy romantasy because there's a lot of us girlies in that Discord and it just keeps happening. We can't help ourselves. But I know I personally want to make sure I try and read at least 1 or 2 nonfiction books every year. So I'm also just not, staying in my same little bubble. And, we should constantly be learning to grow as people. And Sam's one of the people I know. I know like 3 people, I think, in my whole life circle who enjoy and intentionally read and mostly read nonfiction books. So even though we don't read a lot of them, I convinced him to join our Discord and said I will specifically make sure we're reading at least 1 this year and I will invite you on here to talk with me about it because one of my favorite authors who used to write fiction now writes nonfiction. We're discussing Everything Is Tuberculosis by John Green today. Most of people would know John Green for his fiction novels that became very successful movies, some of them, like The Fault in Our Stars and such, but this is his second nonfiction title. Did you read his first one at all, or is this his first nonfiction book that you've read, Sam, of the 2?
This would have been the Anthropocene.
Yeah, the Anthropocene reviewed, yes, is his first one.
No, I'm not. This is literally his first book that I read.
Okay, nice. I really enjoy the first one. The first one too, it's a series of essays, so it's different from this book because every chapter is basically a short essay and it talks about just all sorts of different things, and some of them start out seemingly very like intentionally serious and very important and talk about, like, even the title suggests we're talking about this important thing in history, but some of them are like, why Diet Dr. Pepper is better than regular Dr. Pepper. And you're like, this is going to be silly. Right. But by the end of it, it's kind of like this book. It's not about Dr. Pepper. It's like about way more than that. That's just kind of like the hook. And I think almost he took that attitude into this book because rather than just talking about, like, the subtitle of this book is The History and Persistence of Our Deadliest Infection, but he called it Everything Is Tuberculosis, because hinting at how, yes, this book is about this one disease, but I'm really going to talk about how this disease is a microcosm for a bigger problem and a bigger situation just modern day humans and capitalism have created in our world. At least that was my take on the book. So as usual, we start overall impressions and we work more specific. So what was your overall impression star rating of the book, if you're someone who uses star ratings for your books?
Oh, I didn't really think about it in terms of rating. Readability-wise, it's fantastic. Mm-hmm. It's probably the easiest thing I've read so far, especially since I'm reading like a lot of historical stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is older. So, like, I think I'm currently reading A Treatise of Human Nature by David Hume.
Okay.
Which he's from the 1700s, so
a lot
of stuff is unreadable. So,
yeah.
Genuinely speaking, great read. And I like how he narrativizes like the story of Henry, mm-hmm. Which a lot of the book is spent around this one individual who he knows, and it's pretty. It turns it into a story and then uses like that as a sort of basis to launch about facts and the history of actual TV.
Yeah, I love that too, because again, for people like me who don't read a lot of nonfiction, like you said, it makes the readability and how accessible it is, it makes it very easy to read, and it gives you that something to, if you're someone who, like a lot of people, like, I need to attach myself to something, or they need to feel invested in something in a book, fiction or nonfiction, to like keep going to the end, and he uses the story of Henry as that touchstone for readers, and also manages to, despite a book being very negative and very heavy a lot of times, end still on a like somewhat uplifting note via the story of Henry, which was lovely to see, especially when right now there's just so much That's the only thing I was worried about reading this, is because there's so much dumpster fire garbage going on in our world right now, and a lot of people are using reading as escapism, right? And it's the last thing I want to do is read about, oh, look, here's another giant problem that is a global problem that we could solve tomorrow if we wanted to, and we're choosing not to. But again, I still loved reading this book, and again, I think his strength of his nonfiction novels, both so far, is readability for people who are not regulars of the genre, but even people who do read the genre all the time. It's accessible, but it's not like infantilizing. It doesn't dumb things down for the reader. It's just very relatable. And it's also very conversational the way he writes. Like, almost feels like you could just be having, like, you're chatting with him. It doesn't feel like even the book that was a series of essays doesn't feel like he's lecturing you or you're reading like 100% academic paper, even though it's very researched and very academic in nature. Was there anything, what was probably the most surprising thing, if anything, reading the book for you?
I really liked, I think there's a chapter or 2 chapters where he speaks about Louis Pasteur.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, the most surprising thing was how they kind of deal with viruses or infections in general, like how they cured them. Like, when you find out that they cured, like, I just don't remember if it was E. coli or anthrax. I think it might have been anthrax.
I think it was anthrax.
By boiling it.
Yeah.
Boiling it to get rid of like the connectors, and then injecting that into human beings. It's like, okay, like, that's a bit wild.
That is wild.
You just did that, but it works. Slightly, because I was very interested in Louis Pasteur. I have this like list of people that I call like human paragons that I want to keep up with, and Louis Pasteur seemed like the kind of like perfect person to put into that list.
Mm-hmm.
However, he kind of did it like an Edison. He stole a lot of stuff, and apparently he experimented on like kids. So,
yikes!
yeah, so despite the fact that he probably has saved more human beings than you'd think, not a great guy, not the perfect guy.
Yeah. Before I get distracted, James, if you're lurking and listening, do you mind getting me my copy of the book? I forgot to get it. It's on the bookshelf closest to the door in our bedroom, bottom shelf. No. If you're listening, can you grab it for me? Because I made notes. I made actual notes, and there's like, I have a like passage on this page, and I'm like, I would need the book to, also reference that. But anyways, if not, I'll go get it myself. But in case you heard that. I realized I never said my overall ratings. I'm someone who uses star ratings and rates every book I read. Part of it's just because I love using, even though it's shit, and I have other alternatives now to it, but things like Goodreads or the better version, Storygraph, in my opinion, to track what I read. But it also means you end up by having to like rate books when you finish them. So I gave it a 5 because again, it's making a topic that could be very heavy, very doom and gloom, but very interesting, approachable. I was engaged the whole time. I feel like I learned a lot. I wanted to just like practically cover my whole book in like highlighter and annotations because I was intrigued by so many things. And again, we managed to have this book, that touchstone story of Henry, end on this like uplifting note, so I didn't feel completely miserable by the end of reading it, as it would be very easy to do in a book that is literally about. So to be the most mind-blowing thing, and I feel like it would have been, if I read this book maybe like 5 years ago or something, the whole concept of, hey, so we technically have the knowledge and the money to almost eradicate this disease, at the very least make it never a death sentence ever again, make it very treatable, and we're choosing not to. Like 5 years ago, probably would have boggled my mind. In 2025, not really. There's just so many things going on, particularly in North America, that I was just reading it and I was just like, yep, that tracks. That was probably the most depressing part for me, reading it.
When it comes to things like diseases and stuff like that, you can't not talk about politics or any kind of like how we deal with just in general how people deal with other people. Mm-hmm. I do like how tuberculosis has changed. I don't know if I read it in the book itself or if it's something I looked up afterwards. Yeah. But apparently the disease itself has been found in bodies from 300,000 years ago.
That's wild.
It's like, yeah, so this disease has lasted our entire existence, and it's been with us since before humans were even a real thing.
Yeah. Like, it might have been one of the first diseases a human ever had, that we know as humans. Yeah. Thank you for the sub, Rhodey. I appreciate you. Welcome back. But yeah, that is also crazy. Because also you think of, like, if before reading this book, if you said, what's the most deadly disease? Like, I probably, like most people, probably immediately go cancer. Just because it's also the most, like, not sensationalized. What's the word I'm looking for? Like, the most in the media, the most present, the most, like, omnipresent in society in general.
It's one we haven't solved yet, yeah.
And it's one we haven't solved yet, right? And maybe also because, you know, I'm a streamer, so I do, like, St. Jude every year. There's other reasons why cancer might be the forefront of my mind. After cancer, again, I have no idea if it's factual or not, but my bias probably would have said, like, maybe AIDS, just because the history of the AIDS epidemic and also how it disproportionately affected the queer community and various other communities and stuff. But I never in my life, while reading this book, would have said tuberculosis for the exact reasons he talks about in the book. This is a disease that even internally, like, I never consciously formed this opinion, but it's a disease for many people's mind for, like, third world countries. It's disease for poor people, because in Western and rich and, like, countries with the money to treat it, it isn't that big of a problem, and we just treat it. But realizing how present it is wild. Like, I remember before reading this book, there was a story in the States right now. There's a tuberculosis, like, outbreak. And again, I say outbreak, not that it was not present in the US and it's come back, but just a surge in visible cases in Kansas right now, I think. Kansas is the state. And before reading this book, I'd have been like, I would have thought, again, it was a disease that was gone and had come back in North America. Only reading this book realized it's not gone. There's probably people walking around all over every country in the world that have it. It's just such a latent and potentially non-life-threatening disease unless you get the drug-resistant kinds or certain other kinds. Thank you, James. So that was also, I think, the most fascinating thing to me. Like you said, just how old and persistent, as is in the subtitle of the book, but just how present this disease is, and yet so many people will never worry about it in their life, whereas others will spend their entire life worrying about it because of where they live or where they were born, which is wild to me. I also like the title, that everything is tuberculosis. Obviously, this problem applies to more than just this disease. There's lots of things that we as a society could eradicate, and we have the resources to, we just choose not to, like homelessness. There are some countries that have done it, and other countries just, like, choose not to. So the title relates in that way. But also the amount of, here's all these little things that were invented because of TB, like Adirondack chairs, the things I sit in every summer at my mom's cottage, invented for tuberculosis patients, and all these little examples, and, like, again, relating it to Louis Pasteur and all these things. And now I find myself, I wish I could, like, meet John Green, pick his brain, because he talked about how I bore my kids and my wife, and everyone's sick of hearing me talk about, we'll be talking about anything, and I'll tell them how it's related to TB. I'm like, I would love that. I want you to be like the dad in My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where he tells everyone how every word, the root of it's Greek, but it's John Green's, how he can relate everything back to TB, and I would sit there for an hour and listen to it. Fascinating.
I think if someone said what was the most deadly disease to me, or asked me that, I would have said malaria.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
So I would have thought that would have been the most. Apparently it's TB, which is kind of crazy. But
I know.
It is so culturally ingrained in us. Mm-hmm. Like the idea of I think it's in the book. He says like the idea that you don't need to say anything, but someone coughing and then there's blood on the handkerchief, you already know what it is. You know that they're going to die.
Yep. Well, I also never realized consumption and TB were the same thing, because as someone who reads lots of historical novels, watches lots of movies, like I know, and consumption, like I said, is the easiest illness to fake on screen, because you cough some blood into a handkerchief and everyone immediately is like, oh no, this wasting disease. Never realized that was the same thing. Like that disease is tuberculosis, and I was like, oh wow, yet another thing I've learned from this book. James brought me my copy now. I have my prop, and I have the thing for passages. So I wrote down a bunch of different either quotes or just general things that I found interesting. And the first quote, and I could have probably covered like every page of this book in highlighter ink with some sort of quote, because I just find the way he writes everything just feels very like poignant and just so interesting to me. But the first one, nothing, and so relevant to right now. Nothing is so privileged as thinking history belongs to the past. And again, because I thought in me this was a disease of the past in the Western world. I thought this was a disease that doesn't exist anymore, and that's my privilege of being born into a wealthier country and a privileged family. But that applies to so many things going on right now. that quote. I wrote page
Yeah.
30, age of TB. I don't know what that means. Let's turn to page 30. Maybe that's like what you said, how it's the oldest
I looked
disease.
up the death rates in the US for TB. 565 people still die from it in the US.
Every year?
Yeah, according to the first search. So that might be AI, so it might be... but I would say it's probably around that.
Yeah, like give or
in
take.
2022, there were 565 deaths.
See, that's wild to me. Because again, this is a disease that in my mind didn't exist in our country. I'm not in the U.S., but in North America, even. Yeah. I'm very happy I'm not in the U.S. right now. So yeah, I realized what I meant by age of TB. It's like you said, we know consumption has been with us for a very long time. Mummies in ancient Egypt from 5,000 years ago show the telltale deformities that accompany tuberculosis of the bone, et cetera, et cetera. So, and yeah, you said you found that article, you think, even earlier? Because it was, what was the article you
I think it might be in the book where it says that it's in like a pre-human species. There's like 300,000, that's maybe 3 million years ago.
Yeah. Recent genetic evidence indicates the story might go back much further. Our species is perhaps 300,000 years old, but it seems that other species of hominids are being infected with consumption and TB-like illnesses 3 million years ago. Yeah, that's
there we
insane.
go. Yeah, look, I remember the numbers.
That's great. Wow. I'm impressed. Good for you. And then also the part that publishing this book when he did, having the comparisons of COVID as well was a fascinating tool. Yeah. And I imagine this book pre-COVID would have read not very differently, but a little bit differently. Because he talks about the infection rate when compared to COVID on page 34. I'm going to try and find it. Because also it's a fascinating disease because, again, technically this is one of the easiest diseases once with our science we could deal with because of how slowly it replicates and how slowly it takes to mutate and infect people compared to others. But I cannot seem to find the exact quote on this page where he compares it to COVID. Oh well, I'll find it later maybe.
In a weird kind of way, it's kind of like well, it's not a kind disease, but it's so docile. It can live in your body for decades before it comes up, and you can have one stressful weekend and then suddenly you are ill, and then it can take you a year to die. It's so, and the way he described it before, the Western medicine sort of like, I don't know what you call it, canon, I don't know, the word canon but for medical stuff, came up with the idea that just realised as well as the other ones that it was infection based rather than hereditary.
Yeah.
They kind of glorified it in a weird way. It made you frail, but it made you beautiful in a weird way. And the artists would use it as inspiration.
Yeah. Yeah. That part was wild to me. Yeah, the part talking about when the phase where when it was still consumption and not tuberculosis, and it became this disease of artists, and it was almost like not a good thing, but you became kind of like semi-revered, or it wasn't only negative things associated with having this disease. And especially then I immediately thought of Moulin Rouge. It's like, the courtesan that has it, and the movie of like artists and musicians. And then I also thought about the modern day term, like because they're like, oh, they're so beautiful, the pale skin, and they're skinny and they're thin. There was a term for a while, I think in the 90s or early 2000s, in fashion, where literally it was called like heroin chic, where like models and the ideal woman was so skinny, they literally compared them to like a drug addict who is deteriorating from this disease. And how, again, they're using this disease to be like, you should look like they were emulating the appearance of someone who was dying. And at first I was like, that's insane. And then I thought of this thing in my lifetime, this other like comparison. I was like, it's not that insane. And that was the journey of this whole book for me. I'd read something and be like, that's crazy. That's mind blowing. That's so wild. And then I would take a minute to sit with it and then think about modern comparisons or things that were in my lifetime or recently, and be like, yeah, we have not changed that much as a species, have we? No. I found the part, it's a footnote on this page, that's why. Because they're comparing the way it infects people and how it grows so slowly because the bacteria takes a long time to build its cell wall and everything. And it says it creates this like ball of tissue around it. And it says, footnote number 7. Where is it? Where's number 7? Because either the average case of influenza spreads to between 1 and 2 people For COVID-19, it spreads to like 1.4 to 2.4. So on average, 1 to 2 people. For everyone who has COVID, you give it to 1 to 2 people. The person who has TB would usually give it to 15 people per year, as opposed to like 1 to 2 people in a shorter amount of time. Just like at how it's the low infection rate, but still it's persistent enough to survive despite that everything, which was fascinating to me. And again, technically, it's more infectious overall than COVID, than influenza. But look at the... And also what's fascinating is reading this book in a post-COVID, not post like COVID's gone, but post-initial outbreak COVID world. Because again, we saw what happens when the world like comes together and throws money and scientists and like international cooperation happens to come up with vaccines. Yeah. So if we just decided to treat this disease the same way, like think how much further along we could be. But we literally, the whole point of the book is we are choosing not to. And at this point, tuberculosis is not caused by bacteria, it's caused by human choices, is the overall, if you boil this book down to one sentence. And it just keeps coming up and like hits you over the head with it, but it never gets easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we have cures for it. We have lots of cures for it.
Yeah, we have many. We have like 16 different at this point, I think. But there's 6 or 7 commonly used, but like overall there's something like 16 or 17 like different drugs or drug regimens or combinations of things we can use to like treat this disease.
Yeah. And I think a phrase he uses quite often is that it's about the cure is where the disease isn't.
Yes. Yeah, the disease isn't where the cure is, and the cure isn't where the disease is, and we don't just put them together. I have not read that book, Sassy. Sassy's asking, have we ever read the book Station 11? I have not, personally.
I've heard of it, sorry, Sassy.
I've heard of it, I just haven't read it. So, apologies, won't be able to get that reference. Next, I wrote a note, was on page 50, I just wrote The Disparity, which again talks about the testing availability and the disease, which again, like how if you have the same, even drug-resistant TB in the States is just like, oh, well, it's going to cost you a little more, but like we can deal with it, versus in other countries where it's like, no, you're almost always screwed. There, because we just it's like, oh, it's not worth it. But mostly when they're talking about the budgets, like the healthcare budgets in some of these countries, like where Henry lives, it's like the money for healthcare is like $5 per person. So if your cure costs more than like $5, it's not worth it, and they almost always won't give it to you. That just broke my heart. I was like, what? Oh my god.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's so sad. Oh, and it just so depressing.
It's not just with Henry, because obviously, well, it's not really a spoiler because it's real life, isn't it?
Yeah.
With the story of Henry, in the sense of a real person at the time, and still, thankfully, is the issue is it kind of feels like an inevitability when you're reading through it, because all his friends are dying. His sister passes away, despite the fact that she was usually the more healthy one, and I guess Henry would have been considered like the runt in a sense, because he was always sickly, always getting into bashes and hurting himself by accident, and then gets contracts at TB. There is just like death every turn in the story for Henry, or in Henry's life. And despite that, he's sort of like a source of inspiration for everyone else around him to sort of like cheer them up.
Yeah, his resilience was absolutely impressive and astounding to read about. Oh, excuse me. I'm still getting over a cold, and I would like it to go away. It's also like I love the inclusion of some of Henry's poems that he wrote in the book, because he has like not much else to do while he's stuck in this hospital, which is a hospital known to everyone who lives in that country as a death sentence, which is also wild. Because imagine it's like, hey, this is the only place you can recover, but also expecting recovery to happen, especially when for so long there was such a misunderstanding of the disease, and it was all about like, you just need to like rest and want it enough, was literally at one point almost like an opinion. But yet the place where you have to do that is a place that everyone else thinks of as a death sentence, and a place even the patients there, like almost no one around you has a shred of the hope or any, and yet he's there like trying to be the hope for everyone. And I'm just like, this kid is insane. I also love
They
that
call it
he
the
makes a
place you go
he has a
where you
YouTube channel.
die.
And he plugs his
Yeah,
YouTube
at the
channel
end,
at the
right?
end. That's so cute.
That's funny.
I'm
Well,
sad.
you mentioned poems as well. There was one that he references Kurt Vonnegut's
Yeah.
in Kurt Vonnegut's novel *The Cat's Cradle*,
Hmm.
which has anyone played Doki Doki Literature Club? Where
Yes.
there's a poem. It's very similar to that. I got to hunt, bird got to fly, man got to sit and wonder why. So I got to sleep, bird got to land, man got to tell himself he understand. Kind of, well, I don't know if it's like translated or not, but it's like sort of childish in a sort of like
Yeah.
in Natsuki's kind of way, but it's kind of makes a lot of sense in how we perceive things in the world.
Oh, your captions disappeared. Let me send you another invite. Did you close the tab to where you have to leave it open? You don't have to have it active, but you just have to leave it open. Oh well.
Maybe because Edge is weird.
Yeah, Pixel Chat does that sometimes. Like when we use it for my D&D thing, it happens. Not in mine usually. I have good luck, but in Briar's campaign, people's captions like my captions died all the time. So apologies if there's anyone watching this now or in the future that is a captions user. For you missed some of Psalm's wonderful thoughts for a while. I apologize. I wrote a note, and now I think I wrote the wrong page because I just looked at that page, and there's definitely nothing about it on there. But I wrote, there's a great section about chronic illness, tuberculosis as racialized violence, and the connections to slavery are wild. Go to that page. That's definitely not what it's talking about. So I wrote the wrong page down, which is unfortunate because that sounded like it would have been really interesting to touch on.
Yeah, because when the sort of medical canon changed over to the idea and concept of it being a disease that you got infected by, it overnight became a disease of the poor and the filthy, or what they disliked in society. So it was often considered. It's such a weird one because it's there's a bit of it's not as contradictory because it happened, but there's like a weird sort of case where you didn't get it so much in rural places because there's not as much contact with humans in rural areas. It's a wider space.
Yeah.
But it's which is where they would have been working in the farms and such, slave camps really. But that's where the disease would have kept going because they wouldn't have been bothered to treat them, and they would force them to live in smaller locations.
Yeah.
So the concept of the healing of it, when someone from white society would actually get the disease, that the prescription, the sort of like treatment was to go to a dry place.
Yeah, a dry place with lots of fresh air and open space and stuff like that, yeah. Go take a vacation, get better. Literally.
At the start of the book, he mentions that this is like why certain places even exist, like why New Mexico is a state.
Yeah!
It's partially because of the tourism. I guess it would be tourism. Not really tourism, it's like the treatment for the disease. Is
medical tourism? Is that a thing?
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, call it medical tourism. Yeah.
Yeah.
The next part I wrote down that was I'm gonna go back and reread this page. Not so much about TB specifically, but a bit about the author, because the last fiction book he wrote before he became a nonfiction author was Turtles All the Way Down, I believe, and the main character has fairly severe OCD. And one of her obsessive compulsions is about like germs and bacteria. Like she has a cut on her hand that she constantly isn't letting it heal because she's like every day takes the band-aid off, like applies more like polysporin or like sanitizer, puts at one point she gets so hung up about the bacteria inside her, she can't do it, like her microbiome, that I believe she has like a breakaway and like drinks hand sanitizer and then realizes, what the hell did I just do? Like, I'm insane. And John Green writes that one reason he's interested in TB is I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and my particular obsessive worries tend to circle around microbes and illness. Before the germ theory of disease, we did not know that around half the cells in my body do not, in fact, belong to my body. They are bacteria and other microscopic organisms colonizing me. And to one degree or another, these microorganisms can also control the body. And then he later on says there's even emerging evidence that one's microbiome may have a relationship with thought itself through the gut-brain information axis, meaning that at least some of my thoughts may belong not to me, but to the microorganisms in my digestive tract. And research is indicating that certain gut microbiomes are now associated with major depression and anxiety disorders. That was absolutely mind-blowing to me. Like, I knew about, like, I've heard through, my time where I was working with another company, and we were like working and like selling wellness stuff, and they talked a lot about like the gut, skin, like head, whatever, like the connections. Like they were kind of in not sciencey ways talking about this, like your microbiome's connection to other parts of your body. But they meant more not from a psychological perspective. But that was, I read that and I closed the book and just sat there for a minute and was like, that's hella cool and terrifying. And I don't even have OCD. Yeah. Imagine if you're him and like this knowledge would just it's terrifying.
I guess you gotta sort of deal with it in a weird way. Like it kind of one of those situations where this is how the world is.
Yeah, there's like nothing you can do about this. Like you can in no way remove all this microbiome, these organisms from your body, because you will die, because they also serve other important functions. Like they are a part of you, yet they're not. It's just this interesting cognitive dissonance of these organisms are inside me. They work on my bodily systems. They are a part of me, but they're not also actually a part of me. Wild.
Brings into question like what is me. I guess.
Yeah. Because also they can control thought. Because like your body, not most people. That's a wrong statement, but I would say the definition of like self that I would prescribe to, like the intrinsic of like your soul or what is you, it's like your brain. Everything about your body isn't you. Your body is a vehicle that transports your brain and the things that are actually you around. Your body shares lots in common with other people. Your body's really not that exciting. But if now it's like there's things in your body that can directly affect like your thoughts and the things that in theory do make you and make you unique and like make you the person that you are, well then maybe my whole viewpoint is wrong. Your body is intrinsically also like, dude, it's not just, a vehicle that is carrying the core of you around and transporting your brain. It's not just a meat suit. That's sad to me. Because I would prefer if it was just a meat suit, in all honesty.
Have you ever seen a what do they call it? The human nervous system, like a amputate. I guess like someone's taken out human.
Like in those, like the museum where they had like the real human systems and body parts and like bodily things out, and then they've removed someone's and shown their nervous system.
Yeah. That I would say is you.
Yeah.
In a sort of like soul sense. Like,
yeah.
Because humans are weird. We are the body is a vehicle for the brain in a sense, but it is the body is also partially a part of the brain. Like,
yeah.
As you said, the stomach influences the brain. It's not the other way around. The brain doesn't tell the stomach that it's hungry. The brain is told the stomach is hungry.
Yeah.
And
that's
it's reflected in our language as well. When someone grabs my leg, I say, "You grabbed my leg. It's my property almost." But when they grab my shoulders, they get off me. You grabbed me, get off me, kind of thing. It's more a part of my actual myself rather than my leg, which is slightly more disconnected from who I consider to be who I am. Yeah.
I guess part of my viewpoint that comes from, I come from a family of academics, and they are very much like, they all like their bodies are vehicles for their brain. Their brains are their prized possession, the most important thing about them, and how they completely define themselves, because learning academia and study is like the greatest thing one can do with one's life. So that probably is a heavy influence to my perception too of like, what is you? What is the person? My next note I put on page 108, I just wrote care versus control focused treatment. Because it seems like there's a diverging schools of thought and how they deal with tuberculosis. Is it the care of the actual patient versus the patient's now like collateral? We care about controlling the disease and controlling the spread. And it's less about curing you and more about like keeping you away from other people or preventing the TB from becoming drug resistant TB if it wasn't already and stuff like that. Because talked about how the main protocol for treating this disease in countries with less money is very by now outdated and very, again, the control focus, not care focus, that DOTS protocol, where basically we're doing the screening that's less effective, but we're doing it because it's affordable. Whereas we could do the more advanced screening and catch drug resistant TB earlier, catch these things, but it's so expensive and not necessarily worth it. And then the ones we find, we give them the basic common treatment, which we know is not going to be effective to many kinds of TB, but it's the cheapest one to give, and it will still deal with a good percentage of it. So we give that. But then if it doesn't work, we've now made more drug-resistant TB. We've made the bigger problem. Just the whole, like, being able to be like, I get why this is, and even John Green writes, I understand why this is the protocol, but it's also just so... It's such a hindrance to the long-term fighting of this disease. It's very short-term. And that, again, care versus control focus and the schools of thought. Because I've never thought about the way disease control is approached in, like, those two different mentalities. It was interesting.
Yeah, the human cost is incredibly massive, but they really don't have the resources to be able to focus on. DOTS is kind of like, we don't have that much money. What can we do with the money we have? And this is the best they can pretty much do.
Yeah.
Though there is some, I think John does mention a few criticisms he has of it being the number one, the detection is only going to work for the people who are mostly affected, and it's only going to work 50-50.
Yeah.
For them.
Basically, they have to already have a certain, like, amount of the disease and has to be progressed far enough. Whereas a lot of people, there's testing that could pick it up if you have it before it's affecting you yet. And that would be so much better in controlling spread, but it's expensive.
There's a cool thing I wanted to mention as well. How much of, like, the horror genre itself is probably responsible. Well, TB is probably responsible for it. Like, asylums and sanatoriums were TB. It was started for TB. The idea of long corridors, excessive amounts of boredom, creating people who would write on walls because they're so bored.
Because they literally were told, like, you need to just aggressively rest and do nothing. Again, well, we made these Adirondack chairs for you. We'll wheel you outside if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's inside your confined space. But if you're lucky, outside in the sun, inside, sit in this chair and do nothing all day. Like, you have to, the most aggressive rest you can do, and that's what's going to get rid of it. So yeah, that boredom would, no, because they weren't allowed to do anything. They weren't allowed to move. They weren't allowed to leave their beds or chairs. You just have to sit there and just think really hard about fixing your illness. And I'm like, good God, I would absolutely go insane. I would not make it.
You wouldn't see that many people. You wouldn't be able. Well, you would be allowed to interact with other guests, but you probably would have talked to them to death.
Yeah.
Already, because you're always with them. Potentially, your roommates in a sense. Your cellmates, I guess.
Yeah.
Your
cellmates. Oh, the part with Henry's roommate was so sad when his, like, the person he got closest to in that hospital passed away, and the toll it took on him, and, like, that was the first time they saw his kind of hit light, because he was such a beacon for, like, optimism. The first time it really dimmed, and he almost gave up. And that was just like, oh, that part tore my heartstrings so much. But and that mentality still exists. They're like, especially in cancer, how often do we hear even the language used to describe cancer, their battle with cancer, and all these things that kind of put, not directly, like, we're all in a Western society, we all know enough about cancer that you can't will it away. You will not, like, lose your battle with cancer just because you are, like, weaker willed. And yet there's kind of the subtext, though, that is a factor. Like, it is almost, there's this, and the people that do like, keep that mentality are these, like, so these paragons of virtue and paragons of fighting disease. This idea that if you aren't mentally in the space where you're, like, you're trying to be optimistic and you're, like, mentally fighting your own disease, you are lesser and almost like you deserve less to be cured. I think still exists in almost any other illness, not just TB, but I think that's where it came from, was because that was the outlook of how, before we understood it, how to treat TB was rest, fresh air, and just want to get better, which is sad.
There's an element of sort of, like, blame on people for disease. There is a sort of, like, argument that you can be blamed for things that happen to you to a degree, like a 1 percentile kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, like, the idea is that, like, you got it because of you doing wrong. Was always
Yeah, how when TB became like a moral failing, like you got this because you did something wrong, you weren't
dirty or
religious,
filthy.
or you
Yeah.
associated with the wrong person. Because even one of my favorite quotes in the whole book relates to that. It was on page 124, and he says, "Why must we treat what are obviously systemic problems as failures of individual morality?" Because again, like it's obviously systemic reasons why certain parts of the world and countries have more of this disease, like when like the cost of healthcare and hoarding the good drugs for ourselves, and also companies trying to patent and keep the cost of their drugs high, like the Johnson & Johnson debacle with their TB drug versus other ones, and yet it's still seen as, no, it's this person's fault. It's their fault they got TB. It's not these companies. It's not the system. It's not politics. It's not geography. It's this other thing, which even now there's like a little bit of that. Like I would say the comparison, like maybe say I saw someone who's like they have COVID, but I find out they're an anti-vaxxer and they don't wear masks. I'd be like, well, you deserve it, you got it. Which like there is some degree, yeah, like you chose not to do these things that science says would help prevent, but neither guarantee you don't get the disease. Like it's not 100% immunity. So that is still, I am doing a moral judgment on this person, saying you deserved your disease, which is too far. And really that's a harmful mentality. I could be like, you didn't help yourself. You definitely increased your chance of getting it by doing those things. Does it mean you deserve it? Technically, no. Like that's me being a judgmental person. And it kind of, that was like the closest, I would say, comparison in just my own personal outlook and life to that quote, since I am lucky enough to live in a privileged country where systemic problems like that don't affect me as much as they would affect people living in other regions like that. Oh, and I also wrote further validation.
Yeah.
I mean, never buying Johnson & Johnson stock or getting their COVID vaccine.
You're gonna go out of your way to boycott them.
Well, because when I was younger, I was lucky, and I, as a kid, like a family friend, I inherited some money, and when I was 18, I was told that I inherited this money, and it's what I used to like get my master's degree, basically. But when I was like 18, 19, I met with like my parents and the financial advisor, and they were telling me what to do with it, and what, of course, like where to like invest this money, blah blah blah. And the financial advisor really wanted me. He recommended Johnson & Johnson and said why he liked their stock, and I said no, not because of this. At the time, I'd read something else about them, and I also knew a lot of their products were super high in like a certain type of ingredient, because it's also when I was working with that wellness company, so I'd also drank a lot of Kool-Aid about certain ingredients and certain things that shouldn't be in products, and I was like, no, I will never. Because also like buying a stock, I don't care about making money, it's still me endorsing. If I own stock in a company, to me that's still me saying I, at least on paper, support this company because I've given them money, you know? So I was like, I don't want to do it. And then reading this book, I was just like, I feel so validated. Vindication. I told you, financial advisor. Fuck Johnson & Johnson. And I remember hearing about that before reading this too, because I followed John Green on social media, like on his like Blue Sky Threads, Twitter, and I've watching him on YouTube for years. And I know about the lobbying work he was doing when Johnson & Johnson's drug patent was up for renewal, and like the work he was doing to tell them, no, you can't keep this drug like expensive and privatized. Like this needs to be allowed for people to make like the generic cheaper versions. Like this is criminal and inhumane if you're gonna just try and continue to make money off this. And now I get even more seeing how prevalent and just how massive this disease actually is. I'm like, yeah, that's fucking horrific. It's like my thoughts whenever you see also people like the whole thing with like insulin for diabetes also blows my mind. It's like, hey, this costs how much to make, and yet in certain countries it costs how much to get. Absolutely criminal.
Yeah, there's arguments you can use for like certain healthcare provider, sort of like manufacturers. Like the newer insulin stuff is fantastic, and the stuff that they develop and the amount of money they put into R&D does justify a cost.
Cost, yes.
It's the cost will be because they have to pay themselves back.
Yeah.
Right? They have to make sure that investors get their money back. So the initial cost is always going to go up really high, and then it's going to steadily go down over time.
Yeah.
As more people, because that's just how business works. The thing that is, I don't think you can really defend it outside of it just being sort of like wild capitalism, is lobbying government to put your product, your copyright, for as long and longer and longer and longer and longer. I don't think you can justify that. And
Like,
J&J
once
to
it's
do
run
that
its
is
course, you need to
disgusting.
let it end. It needs to be now it's time. Because
Yeah,
by that point, you also, in theory, should have recouped your R&D costs if your drug,
yeah.
like, was as good as it was. Like, all those things should have happened, and now it should be in the phase where we let the price go down, and you let people make generic equivalents and stuff like that.
And you can still make your money on your product because yours is the original, the
Yeah.
good one. But
And
now
you're
if someone
always
wants
gonna
to
have
make a better
people who
one,
want to
they
pay
can.
for the original and pay for the brand name. Like, I remember, I one of my comfort shows and like my rewatch shows is Gilmore Girls, and there's a scene where Lorelai's taking her mom to go. She had eye surgery, laser eye surgery, and she's recovering badly and can't see. So her mom has to drive her around to do her errands, and they drive to like 3 or 4 pharmacies to get the drug she wants. She's like, Mom, really? We're going to like, you can just get the generic version. She's like, if I'm willing to pay for it, I deserve to have my drug say Valium on the bottle. Like, she wants the brand name. She doesn't want the generic. And so I'm like, if people want to, you know what? Your choice. There'll always be people like that who are like, I trust the original and I don't trust the ones, even though in theory it's like the same formula, same ingredients, different name. Same all
There's
those
a
things.
this is sorry, this is from like a European slash British perspective, but
Yeah.
Americans are crazy about healthcare. Um, in not in this isn't even like blaming the healthcare industry at this point. This isn't the healthcare industry's fault. This is just Americans' fault. Where like if I go to the dentist, I'm not getting put under. They put Novocaine in, and I get my surgery done as I'm awake. But in America, apparently you guys, well, not you, you Canadian, but
Woo.
they will get themselves put under, and they will just be unconscious, and that costs significantly more. General
Oh yeah.
anesthesia is like
Oh yeah.
massively expensive. If you're going to the dentist and getting general anesthesia, you you're the problem. You're the reason
You're
why
the
it costs so
problem.
much for healthcare.
I will say I've never done that fully. I considered it once because I have severe dental anxiety. I used to throw up at or after every dental appointment, and I've never had anything wrong with my teeth. I had my first cavity last month in my whole life. And other than that, I've never had anything wrong with my teeth. I'm lucky, knock on wood. Just teeth cleanings, right? But I had so much anxiety, partly because my gag reflex is so bad. It's so sensitive, and I have a really small mouth. Dentists have confirmed. My mouth is very, very small, and every time they get to my back teeth, I was so afraid of throwing up on the dentist, and I almost have like 7 times, and I've thrown up in the dentist. Luckily, not like on them while they're in my mouth, but either way, I'm just so, and also it's the one time I ever have anything resembling like any sensory overload issues, the sounds and like the sensations of like the scraping or the thing, like my whole body
Smell.
like shakes. The smell doesn't bother me so much. It's purely the physical sensations. So I would like cry, I get sweats, and even as an adult, I still like sweat going to the dentist, I get anxiety. So the one time I needed any dental work done that was significant, last year, I think it was last year, last Christmas, or the Christmas before, 2 Christmases ago. I passed out in the morning getting ready to go to James's family because I was having a bad, like my fibro was really bad that day. And I had an episode of vasovagal syncope where my vagus nerve gets overstimulated and I pass out. And I was in the bathroom, so I passed out face first and hit the tile floor, and I I chipped my front teeth and one bottom tooth.
Yikes.
So I had to go get emergency dental surgery, and I was worried they'd have to replace the whole bottom one because it looked like it had broken down to like the root. The top one was just a cosmetic chip was out of it. The bottom one looked pretty messed up. But luckily there was a thin layer of like dentin covering the root. They could just do the like build a fake tooth on top of it kind of thing. And it was pretty chill, but I still was like, just so you know, I'm terrified. I've never even had a cavity and I have to do severe dental work. I'm gonna freak out. So they didn't give me Novocaine. They didn't put me out, but I do go to a dentist that offers that service, but they gave me basically this like anxiety gas. So they gassed me up before, and the whole time I described it as I normally would feel really stressed right now, and I had this awareness that there's things going on that really stress me out, but I'm not that bothered by it. That's so weird. And like it was very weird. This whole like half my brain is freaking out, the other half's like we're fine, and I was awake. I wasn't under. But I am the person where I'm one of those bitches who sometimes might cost them more money. But I've only done it once, and very rarely the people who do it for like everything, for like every procedure, even a cleaning, like put me under. I'm like, okay, calm down. Even I could like white knuckle through it, you know? Come on.
Yeah.
Sassy says when we were talking about the generic drug versus like name brand drug, not always true. I have one medication, only the brand one I don't get side effects from, while the others make me throw up. That is true.
Yeah, there will be.
There are times.
They also will develop them.
Yeah. And sometimes there are obviously times where, like, you know, even though it's like at its core the same ingredients or the same active ingredients, but the other stuff they put in it is what makes a difference. But there are also many instances where the generic is identical to the name brand and you're paying for nothing more than the name. Example on like those costs, I wrote on page 139. He talks about how the price of not just the drugs for TB, the price of the screening tests is part of the problem. And again, like that's why they do the less thorough, less sensitive form of screening as part of that DOTS regimen. Because molecular testing for TB is the kind that can catch drug-resistant TB, it can catch TB earlier, stuff like that. It says access to molecular testing has been severely limited by cost. As Dr. Mohammed Shawib, don't know if I'm saying that right, of Doctors Without Borders put it, not enough people have access to gene expert testing, just the name brand of like the people who patented molecular testing for this. And the high price is a major factor. One lab tech in Sierra Leone told me the machines are great if only we could afford the cartridges. Because a lot of the hospitals in like Sierra Leone, in African countries where TB is a large problem, have the machines for the testing. They just don't. It's like we have a toothbrush, we just can't afford the toothpaste. Like they have half of the thing they need, and the part that's consumable and disposable is the part that costs a lot. So they say Cepheid uses a business model similar to that of printer ink or razor blades to generate huge profits. Yeah. They sell the gene expert machines, like selling a printer, at a small profit margin, and then charge high margins on the test cartridges or the ink for that printer themselves. Just as razor handles are often cheap, but the razor blade refills are expensive. In fact, Denair's CEO, Rainer Blair, once noted that Gene Expert provided a razor blade business model in a mission-critical application, as if bragging that the company's profit is built around price gouging the world's poorest countries. They lowered the cost of their standard TB test cartridge in 2023 and pledged to produce the tests at cost to low and middle-income countries, with cost evidence provided by an independent author. But as of 2024, they've not released any audit to back up this promise. So there's also, a few times in the book he mentions this. He mentions companies related to TB treatment. And in modern day, recently, in years, they've promised to do better, but then it's been empty promises as far as we know. They've not released anything to corroborate this effort. So the actual price here says to manufacture these cartridges costs less than $5, but until 2023, the price of a single cartridge was $9.98, and the one to test for extensive drug resistance was $14.90. So it costs $5 to make, costs almost $15 to buy, which is, I get recouping your R&D costs and your manufacturing costs, but that seems a lot. That seems high.
Yeah. I mean, it seems that John is also criticizing, like, I don't know if it's the United Nations that deal with the outbreaks and such, but he's criticizing the DOTS sort of procedure and that it's overall, it's going to cost longer if you continue to do the worst screenings.
Yeah.
And it's non-drug resistant.
Yeah, because, okay, short term, this test is cheaper, but long term, you are because all you do is create drug-resistant tuberculosis. And especially because he's like, if we allow this to continue to go unchecked, maybe, it'll be many generations from now, not our problem, as the classic, we're tossing the stone down the road and letting future generations deal with our problems. But we could eventually get to a point where we create a tuberculosis that is untreatable because we could deal with all these mutated drug-resistant versions now, but we allow them to exist. We allow people to have them and spread them before they die by not doing molecular testing, by not paying and not giving these countries more money for their healthcare systems to have this treatment. And then years from now, all we're doing is now it's just like how COVID like mutated so quickly, and we had to keep coming up with various, like how our modern day flu shot will never keep up with influenza, but we try, and we always like try and do whatever the most common variants are this year. We predict it, but we don't put that energy into tuberculosis when it's deadlier, arguably deadlier and more infectious, just because it's not a problem in certain parts of the world. And that's silly. Yeah, the long-term cost is going to be way more. And people are, it's not even like they're ignorant to that. I feel like it's more people just don't care. Like the people that own these companies, people that are in positions where they are making the decisions related to this, they are making the choice to let it be someone else's problem like 50, 100, whatever, 200 years from now. Who knows? Who knows how long we survive? Who knows how long before we turn our Earth into a ball of fire? But
We'll hopefully survive the next 4 years.
yeah, yeah. I was even the next 4 years are sketchy, shady right now.
Yeah, the WHO is run by the United Nations. Yeah.
But yes, overall, anyone, if you haven't, obviously we've talked a lot about it, but even as much as we've talked about it, it is so worth reading this book. I think it relates to more than just this one disease, as the title implies. Like the overall problems that this disease just throws into sharp relief are problems that affect lots of industries, problems that affect lots of different countries around the world, and also just an interesting look at human psychology in general, kind of looking through, like, again, the watching this disease go in real time from a disease of the artists and the rich and the elite to a disease of the immoral and the poor and things like that. It is a fascinating read, and even if I'm not a nonfiction reader, I am typically a fantasy girly, but I still I devoured this. And look, it's a little book. It's pretty short. For comparison, I'm reading a 694-page book right now. I finished a 1,500-page book before that. That took me quite a long time. Very long time. This is so fast. So fast. And like we said, his writing style is super, super accessible. It's very easy to read. It's not very dense like a lot of nonfiction. It's not crazy academic, yet it is very thoroughly researched. And you can also just tell it is his passion project. Like, this is something he's been dedicated to for years, and he's finally getting to talk about it. I was also honestly shocked how short the book was, knowing how invested in this disease and its treatment John Green is personally. I thought the book would be longer. But I think he's trying to make it accessible for people and make it more likely people will read it.
Yeah, I guess especially with the there isn't so much you can write about it, and the book follows Henry quite significantly and uses it as a jumping off point to learn more about it. So there's much to say. I do want to one of the cool things I like about history is old adverts, and this one was pretty good. The
I could try. What page is it on?
It's on page 99.
Okay, I'll find it. Oh yeah, tuberculosis. Your kiss of affection, the germ of infection. Being like, don't go around kissing babies. Look at that.
There's a few good pictures actually in here. There's some photographs on page 69, I think. It's not labeled, but it's next to 68. Where you've got like the sort of the consumption, the starving artist, the beauty of consumption kind of thing, where they've used it as a sort of like it's considered like a beautiful way to die. They also mention that a lot in the book is the natural, like it's natural for children to die, it's natural for old people to die, and the most natural death would be tuberculosis. Is how they used to think of it back then. And they fade away.
Yeah, because also, other than, again, I immediately thought of Moulin Rouge was the go-to in media, but also La Boheme, the opera, I believe, its consumption that the female main character, like love interest, dies of. There's tons of things where, that wasting disease where they stay beautiful up until they die. And then if anyone's wondering, they have a picture of Henry. This is Henry that we've been talking about. And his story is like the narrative framework the book follows, so that there's still like kind of a beginning, middle, end. And throughout following Henry's story, John Green talks about the history of the disease overall, everything. And then I also like the book has a further reading section, so he recommends if you wanted to keep reading about. And I love when books do that, because if you get really invested in something, you're like, well, now I kind of want to know more. And not just books about TB. He also does like further reading about the history of Sierra Leone, reading to understand the sanatorium age, to understand the rivalry between Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. Like, there's so many specific recommendations. It's great. That was hilarious. That little mini like subplot talking about the Louis Pasteur Robert Koch like war to be who's the best scientist. Like, it's me. No, it's me. It was so funny. I found that thoroughly engaging.
Another cool connection is Arthur Conan Doyle. Apparently, Sherlock Holmes is partly inspired by the idea that Arthur Conan Doyle was really impressed by the idea of figuring out an illness and he used that as the basis for coming up with the Sherlock Holmes character.
Again, the title, everything is tuberculosis. Everything. Sherlock Holmes exists because of tuberculosis. Like, the amount of things that, you find out in this, that without this disease shaping humanity, we might not or definitely wouldn't have, is crazy. Things that you're like, that is so tangential. There's no way. But then it's kind of like, my favorite weird tangential is, without 9/11, we wouldn't have 50 Shades of Grey. And you're like, what? That connection? But there is a traceable, definitive through line, and it's wild. History is funny like that. That's one of my favorite things when you're reading anything that's nonfiction or history, is seeing the dominoes of how we get from point A to point B, and some of those dominoes seem like they're so wildly far apart, but then you look at the connections and you're like, oh, okay, I never would have thought this directly influences this, which is crazy. The other thing,
he even makes the argument for World War One starting because of it. Because the assassins for Franz Ferdinand all had TB, and
that's why they chose to do what they were doing. So they're like, we're dying anyway. Might as well go out with a bang. And if they hadn't had TB, they might not have chose to be assassins because they had, more to live for. That's crazy. Yeah. That is
it's not
crazy.
Necessarily... World War One probably would have happened otherwise. If Franz Ferdinand didn't die.
But it wouldn't have happened at that time in that way.
It wouldn't have been their fault.
Sassy, if the book ever goes down in price, again, if it also didn't cost me an arm and a leg to send things, like package it, parcels, to, like, EU, I would send you my copies. You could read it. Because this is one of those books that I think everyone could benefit from reading this. Because there is so much to learn. And again, like, not just about this disease, but bigger picture. About the way humanity as a whole, and, like, especially, like, developed society versus developing societies, and, like, Western versus non-Western approach problems, and the way we also treat other people and other cultures and stuff. Hoping the US has a cheap version. How much did mine cost? I'm gonna look it up right now. What the cost is in, like, Indigo and Canadian dollars in the States. Everything is tuberculosis.
In the UK, it's only £20.
So yeah, £20 in the UK. Indigo, it's $28.50 Canadian, and Canadian's monopoly money, so that's gonna be like $5. That's it. That's hyperbole. It's not $5, but it'll be cheaper. Now let's check. Everything is tuberculosis. Barnes and Noble. 23 US. But yeah, your best bet is buying Canadian dollars, because now let's see, like, Canadian to euros. So $28.50 Canadian is 18 euros. So there you go. It would cost you 30 euros. You can buy it for 18 here, the equivalent of. Come to Canada. Buy it in Canada.
30 euros and not go to the US.
That's true. Well, that's Canada. That's come to Canada, not the US.
Oh yeah, Sassy, go to Canada.
Go to Canada. Yeah, because fuck the US. No shit. If you're an American viewer and you didn't vote for the orange felon, we're not shading you. We're shading everyone else. But that's exciting. Good luck with your travel overseas. All right. Any final thoughts, Sub, you want to share on our book before we wrap up?
Just to, I guess, stress again the everything is tuberculosis point. It is crazy how deeply ingrained in society tuberculosis has been, and has only really not been for us for the last, 50 years?
Yep.
60 at a push, because the cure obviously was discovered around then. How am I tuberculosis? I'm not. However, a lot of stuff I've read over the long period of time of my life has had tuberculosis as a theme in it. Like, Wuthering Heights has tuberculosis in it. The Silver Sword has tuberculosis in it. Red Dead Redemption 2 has tuberculosis in it.
I guarantee you have consumed one piece of media that features this disease prominently. Again, if you've watched Moulin Rouge, the musical or the movie, tuberculosis is a driving plot point. If you are a fan of opera, then you've absolutely seen it in probably multiple operas. But, like, La Boheme for sure. And you listed a bunch of video games like Red Dead, where it would be there. Yeah, there you go. RDR feature. Yeah, Red Dead Redemption features TB, 100%. I was trying to look up how fast I read this. Because on Goodreads, it'll show you your reading activity for the book, but I'm trying to find it. And now that it's finished, I can't... Hold on. If I go to edit my activity, Okay, I started this on March 29th, and I finished it April 1st. I read it in 2 days. And I could read this in one sitting for sure. I've read longer books in one sitting when I've literally done nothing but like sit down on a couch with a bottle of water and snacks and read all day. I could probably read this in a few hours. And yes, what am I doing? I'm a fast reader. But even if you're not a fast reader, you could probably read this in a week or less. I would put money, no matter what your reading speed, you can read this in a week or less, personally. You enjoy this non-fic discussion, would love to have this again. For sure, because I want to make a point to try to read more of them. And I've been enjoying this a lot as well. Enjoying our chat. The only other nonfiction book I currently own, but again, libraries exist. I don't need to own books. I own a book that I keep putting in their book list in book club for people to vote for. And I think only me and Sam ever vote for it. One almost won this month, a nonfiction one called 6 Women of Salem, The Untold Stories of the Salem Witch Trials, almost won this month. But I picked a different one. We had like a 4-way tie, and I picked the one I did as I had to be the tiebreaker, just because it was the shortest one and I already owned it, and I have a lot of other books I need to read right now. But the other one I own is called The Wager, A Tale of Shipwreck, Mutiny, and Murder. And it says it's a page-turning story of shipwreck, survival, and savagery, culminating in a court-martial that reveals a shocking truth. The powerful narrative reveals the deeper meaning of the events on the wager, showing it was not only the captain and crew who ended up on trial, but the very idea of the empire. And it's written by the author who wrote Killers of the Flower Moon, which was a very well-received book, and a movie that got a lot of critical acclaim, if I remember correctly. And it's nonfiction. On January 28, 1742, a ramshackle vessel of patched-together wood and cloth washed up on the coast of Brazil. Inside were 30 emaciated men, barely alive, and they had an extraordinary tale to tell. They were survivors of His Majesty's ship, the Wager, a British vessel that had left England in 1740 on a secret mission during an imperial war with Spain. So that's the only other nonfiction book I physically own right now. And I put it up there many times, but no one votes for it, which makes me sad. But I might start doing every 2 or 3 months, I'll just pick 2 books. I'll pick a nonfiction, maybe me and Sam together, me, Sam, and Sassy. I'll put, if any of the nonfiction readers, what's on your radar, what are you reading? And we can pick one together, and we can do, because there was meant to be 2 discussions this month. We were meant to do this one and Circe by Madeline Miller. But again, because of illness and real life and travel and whatnot, our Circe discussion isn't happening. But that was like the fiction-y fantasy book we read this month. We could make a channel. I'll make a channel specifically for nonfiction. Why not? I'm down.
Yay!
Because also again, there's people who are going to use it. I just want more people to use our book club Discord. And again, I don't know if you want to join. The invite is pinned on the chat right now. !book club. We'll bring it up. Any and all readers are welcome. You don't have to be a fantasy romantasy reader like myself. Again, I would like to encourage diversity in the genre, because much like many things, I think it's good when people, like, obviously we have a bubble, we like what we like, and there's no shame in that, but I think it's good in anything, any form of media, any activity. It's good for us as humans to venture outside our bubbles every so often, you know? And I'm trying to do that with nonfiction books and read at least 1 or 2 a year. There's just so many books. I'll never live long enough to be able to read everything, you know? It's just sad. I think I saw things like, even if the average person reads, not average, like even if you're a fast reader, even if you read like a book a week or something, I think it was knowing that stat, you'd only read like 20,000 books in your lifetime, which sounds like a lot, but in the grand scope of like, you know, how fast books get published, how many are out there, it's not enough. It's not enough.
Not enough for you.
Yeah. You're going to Salem. I'm so jealous, Sassy. Oh my god.
I've read 4 books this year so far.
I've read 8.
That's like a record for me.
That is still good. And again, we're not here to compare like the people, and I think this is one bad thing Book Talk has done, because Book Talk has caused a resurgence in a lot of reading. Book Talk has led to a tangible increase in sales, and like bookstores like acknowledge this. But one of the downsides of Book Talk is this like glorifying almost overconsumption and making reading like competitive and being like, oh, look at these book talkers. I don't read like 4 to 10 books a month like they do. Oh, I'm a bad reader. I'm not reading enough, blah, blah, blah. No. You read at your pace. You read what you want. Just because I think reading 20,000 books in my lifetime is not enough, you don't have to be insane like me. You don't have to think like that. But yeah, I'm technically, according to Goodreads, one book behind where I should be. But that's because, again, I read a 1,500-page book that took me forever. and think of how many other books. That's like, I could have read anywhere from like 2 to 5 other books technically in that page like that would equate to that many pages. But it's only one. It's Gimli going, that only counts as one. I could have read 10 of these. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I will take away from today. I'll make a nonfiction room in our Discord. Please join if you're watching this. And the invite will always be in the YouTube link. If you're watching this on YouTube, I put the book club invites there too. You can join at any time. And also, if the book we pick, like every month, is not, and maybe 2 a month now if we're doing some nonfiction ones, is not your vibe, you're still allowed to discuss whatever you're currently reading in there. It's not like you can only talk about the books we pick. You can talk about anything book related in there. Another takeaway is read this. Everyone read this. It's so good. It's fast. And I would say, I would consider the things it talks about in are important enough. I would call it mandatory reading in the year of 2025, considering all the things going on in the world. And especially with all the disease, health-related negative changes, in my opinion, that are being made in certain world superpowers and all these movements that are directly contradictory to human health right now. Read this freaking book. Anyway. I think I'm going to stream for a little bit longer because I have a game I'm almost finished and I want to get it fucking finished. So we're going to shift to something else. But this part of book club stream is wrapped up. Thank you to Sam for joining me. I had a lot of fun discussing this and getting a new guest to join me. And if you ever want to be a guest on the book club streams, then you got to make sure you're in the Discord. So join.